Every week, neurologists meet adults in their 70s who did almost everything right. They exercised, they kept their blood pressure under control, they ate well, saw their doctors on schedule, and never smoked a day in their life. Yet one of them begins forgetting names, dates, and conversations years before the other does. Same effort, same discipline, completely different outcome inside the brain. Families are often told it's just genetics or just bad luck, but newer research points somewhere else entirely. Somewhere, almost nobody is told to look. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that difference is, along with 4 discoveries that changed how neurologists think about healthy aging, including one that has almost nothing to do with diet, exercise, or medication at all. To understand what's really going on, you first need to understand how memory actually works, because it's simpler than most people assume. Your brain holds roughly 86 billion cells called neurons. Each one connects to thousands of others through tiny junctions called synapses. Every memory you have, a name, a birthday, the sound of a loved one's voice, exists as a specific pattern of connections between neurons. Remembering something means your brain is rebuilding that pattern, almost like retracing a path through a forest. The more often a path is walked, the clearer it stays. Paths that go unused slowly become harder to find. This ability of the brain to build, strengthen, and reorganize these paths is called neuroplasticity, and remarkably, it continues throughout life, even after 70, even after 90. There's also a concept neurologists call cognitive reserve. Think of it as a buffer. Some brains quietly build more backup pathways over the decades than others, so when age-related changes eventually begin, a person with higher reserve has more alternate routes to draw from. Their memory doesn't disappear as quickly because their brain has somewhere else to go. This is part of why 2 people with nearly identical health charts can age so differently. So naturally, the next question becomes obvious. What actually builds that reserve, and what quietly drains it? For a long time, the leading theories focused on diet. Certain eating patterns have been studied for their association with brain health, and while nutrition matters, researchers noticed something puzzling. 2 people eating almost identically still showed very different rates of decline, so the focus shifted to exercise. Physical activity is genuinely linked to better blood flow to the brain, and that connection is real. But again, researchers found highly active retirees who still declined faster than expected, and far less active ones who stayed remarkably sharp. Sleep was investigated too, since poor sleep is associated with memory problems. It plays a role, but it still didn't fully explain the gap. One by one, the obvious answers only explained part of the picture. Something else was clearly happening underneath all of it, something bigger than any single habit. The answer started to emerge when researchers began studying what actually happens to a person's daily life after they stop working, and it wasn't what anyone expected. Retirement is often described as a reward, and in many ways it is. But researchers tracking brain health after retirement noticed a quiet shrinking of something most people never think to measure: daily mental demand. Workplace conversations disappear. Solving problems with coworkers disappears. The constant, small mental juggling that came with managing a schedule, a team, or a task list simply stops. For many people, television quietly fills more and more of the day. Here's the first wow moment. Watching television, however enjoyable, asks almost nothing of your brain in return. You're not generating a response. You're not retrieving a memory to share. You're not reading someone's tone or deciding what to say next. The brain, much like a muscle, responds to how it's used, and a screen simply doesn't ask it to work. That alone was surprising to researchers, but it still wasn't the full answer. It was only the empty space where something else used to live. So, what was missing? Researchers began scanning brain activity during different everyday tasks, expecting something complicated to explain it. Instead, they found something almost embarrassingly ordinary: conversation. Real back-and-forth conversation turns out to be one of the most demanding, full-brain activities a person can do, more demanding, in fact, than many brain-training games and crossword puzzles that are marketed specifically for memory. Here's the second wow moment. A crossword puzzle mostly uses word recall in isolation. A genuine conversation, on the other hand, forces your brain to retrieve memories to reference, process language in real time, read tone and facial expression, manage emotion, decide what to say next, and constantly imagine what the other person is thinking, all within the space of a few seconds, over and over. Researchers observing brain activity during conversation have seen memory regions, language regions, attention regions, and decision-making regions light up together, simultaneously, in a way that solitary puzzles rarely achieve. That's the discovery that changed how neurologists think about healthy aging. Not diet alone, not exercise alone. Meaningful social interaction appears to be one of the most powerful, natural forms of full-brain exercise available, and it's exactly what quietly disappears for many people after retirement. Here's a third wow moment that surprises almost everyone. It doesn't have to be a deep conversation with someone close to you. Researchers studying something called weak social ties, brief exchanges with a barista, a mail carrier, a neighbor you only wave to, found these small interactions carry real cognitive value too, often more than people expect from something so brief. Talking to someone slightly unfamiliar forces your brain to work a little harder than talking to someone who finishes your sentences for you, which may be part of why it matters more than it seems. Research referenced by organizations like the Alzheimer's Association, along with studies published in journals such as The Lancet and JAMA Neurology, has linked greater social engagement with a lower associated risk of measurable cognitive decline over time. Loneliness and reduced social contact, meanwhile, have been associated with faster memory decline in several long-term studies. None of this means isolation causes memory loss in every case, and no single habit guarantees a sharp mind forever. But the pattern is consistent enough that neurologists now treat social connection as a genuine, measurable piece of brain health, not simply something nice to have. If you've found this helpful so far, subscribing helps us continue bringing evidence-based senior health information to people who need it most. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. How many real, meaningful conversations do you think you've had this week? Not quick hellos, but actual back-and-forth conversation. Take a guess, then tell us the number in the comments, along with your age and where you're watching from. You might be surprised by your own answer, and so might someone else reading it. So what does this actually mean for building brain reserve after 60? None of it requires anything expensive or complicated. It starts with daily conversation, real conversation, not just quick exchanges. A phone call with a friend, a longer chat with a neighbor, or dinner conversation with family all count. Learning groups, whether it's a book club, a class at the community center, or a language course, combine social interaction with active learning, which research suggests may offer added benefit. Volunteering is another strong option, since it usually involves problem-solving, teamwork, and new relationships all at once. Walking with a friend instead of walking alone adds a conversational layer to physical activity, giving you two benefits at the same time. Community groups, whether religious, civic, or hobby-based, provide the kind of consistent, recurring contact that researchers believe matters more than occasional big events. Teaching a grandchild a skill, a recipe, a card game, even how to use a phone, engages memory, patience, and language together. Even making the effort to learn a new name at a class, a group, or with a new neighbor is a small but genuine form of memory exercise. And remember those weak ties: the barista, the mail carrier, the familiar face at the gym. A simple weekly goal, one new conversation, one gathering, one phone call, can be enough to start rebuilding the daily mental demand that retirement so often quietly removes. None of this guarantees anything, and no doctor can promise a symptom-free future. But the research is clear that staying mentally isolated is one of the more modifiable pieces of this puzzle, something largely within a person's control, regardless of age. The two people from the beginning of this video, the one whose memory stayed sharp and the one whose memory faded faster, likely didn't differ nearly as much in diet or genetics as they did in something quieter. How often their mind was truly engaged by another person. The healthiest brains aren't simply the busiest, they're often the most connected. There's one more sign neurologists watch for, one that shows up years before memory problems ever do, and it has nothing to do with forgetting names at all. It shows up in something far more ordinary, in how a person walks. That connection is exactly what we're unpacking next, so if this video helped you see things differently, that one will surprise you even more.